we've got Steve Walker on the phone, and going to be asking some questions about research that's been going on with the Aqua Chi. Pretty exciting research as far as I'm concerned. So, and that's going to happen in just a minute. But I'll just tell you the format. We're going to talk a little bit with Steve, and then open the floor for questions. And I'll be reading the questions off the chat because everybody's, coming in on a chat here. So if you're hearing and seeing me, then just type "I see you" or "yes" into the chat box so that I know that you're all here. Okay, good. Sharon, William, Mary, Christy, a bunch of people. Connie, yeah. So if you have any questions throughout, you can type in a question there into the chat box, and that's how I'll be monitoring, what you'd like to find out. So at this point, I'm going to bring Steve on, and we'll talk a little about developments with the Aqua Chi. So Steve, thanks for coming on.
Good evening, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So there's been some very important research, I feel, that's been going on with the Aqua Chi, all the way up to university level studies and things like that. So what I want to do is take it back to you met a particular researcher and just talk about the genesis of how all this research got started.
Well, I guess it goes back a few years. I believe about 4 years ago, I may have met a lady named Marcy Pannell. She works out of the University of Memphis and also works for the University of Tennessee. I didn't actually find her. She kind of tracked me down because she was using our product and was in a nurse situation where she had the opportunity to use a lot of people, and she had a lot of questions, and she was getting a lot of great results. And so she eventually found me, and we just kind of took it from there. And that kind of evolved into a big, long line of research that she started. And for the last 2 years, it's actually moved into some laboratories, into some universities. So it's pretty exciting.
Wow. Okay. So did she share with you, when she came to you, before doing the university research, did she share with you her experiences using the Aqua Chi?
Yeah, quite a few of them. I guess it's the general type of thing where you might be, treating someone with aches and pains, or just all the general conditions that most of the practitioners are familiar with. And there's probably a lot of people out there using it for 100 different things. So it was an assortment of all the typical things that most people are already reporting.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, and so at some point she expressed an interest in taking it further, and doing, something that's could be documented and that kind of thing. What was, how did that begin?
Well, what happened is we came in contact with the head of the microbiology department at the University of Tennessee, and he was showing an interest, and we met there. And at first, they wanted to just take a quick look just to see whether it would actually do anything. So they started with some strawberry plants in the lab there, and they, charged the water and just watered them with it, just to test to see whether there'd be a difference between a control group and a treated group. And of course, to their surprise, there were some major differences between the control and the treated. And that kind of inspired them to get excited and then go a little further.
Okay, well, I should mention that the plant testing, as that was, Steve did almost 20 years ago now in Australia with some agricultural testing, and found similar results. Would you agree?
Right, they did. Yeah, and I was involved quite a few years ago. It's almost like a decade and a half ago, where we did a lot of research with plants back in Australia, where we achieved phenomenal results. I mean, there's a huge application in agriculture for the technology. We just haven't gone in that direction yet because the response to how well it works with people has just been overwhelming.
Right. It's got such a wide-ranging benefit there. But you know, for those of you who don't know it, you even in your home or in your personal residence there, you can use that Aqua Chi water to feed your plants and things like that, and they'll just love it. So I've been doing that for a long time. Anyway, so you did this initial round of testing with plants and had some pretty interesting results. So people caught notice of it, and these I take it are the academics, the doctors and people associated with doing research. Yes.
Right. Well, I mean, everybody who actually saw the tests that were going in the lab were really impressed, and so they were like, well, let's do some more. Which is when Marcy then went and secured a grant from the University of Memphis, which was the funding that actually ran the tests in the University of Tennessee. So we had one university funding another to further explore what it could do.
Right.
What's the interesting part was is what's really exciting is the actual tests that they decided to choose to run first. What they wanted to do is they wanted to jump straight to a petri dish to see what would happen with cells when they're exposed to the treatment versus cells that weren't. And what made it super interesting is the actual type of cells that they chose. I guess it's the cells they had in the lab at the time, but for some reason they decided to pick cancer cells.
Oh.
And so, of course, once they started running the trials with the cancer cells and started seeing the results they were getting, it became very apparent and very mind-blowing as just the results that they were getting. It was pretty phenomenal.
Right. So talk a little about why it was so phenomenal. What was happening? What were the results that were coming through that just surprised everybody?
Well, the initial tests that they ran, they basically had two groups. They had a control group, and of course they had the test group. And what they were seeing is in the test group, they were seeing cancer cells that weren't dividing. In other words, they just weren't growing. And then, but of course, in the control cancer cells, you put them in a petri dish, they're just going to grow out of control like crazy. But with the test group, they were getting above 90% below the control group. So basically, the growth of cancer is being suppressed by over 90%.
Okay, so yeah, let me understand one thing on that. Is that were these cancer cells put in a dish with Aqua Chi treated water? Is that what was happening?
Absolutely, just like they did with the plant. They exposed the cancer cells growing in the petri dish to the treated water after it's been treated with the Aqua Chi, and of course with the control group, they took the water from the container before it was treated. So it was the same water, but just so before and after, that's how you get your control and your treated.
Okay, so the control was just probably water by itself, not having had any contact with the Aqua Chi, and then the other one was Aqua Chi treated water. Now, how long was the water treated with the Aqua Chi before they put it in the dish?
Just the regular recommended time that we recommend for everybody to treat themselves with, just for the 35 minutes.
Okay, all right. So based on that, there was something different about that water, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Okay.
And what they did is they actually ran that particular line of test about 5 or 6 times.
Okay.
And of course they did get the same results each time, which then they decided to progress a little further to do another test where they used just a regular healthy cell line and compared a healthy cell line once again with the regular water versus the treated water, which of course produced more interesting result because we were seeing growth of healthy cells at up to 2.5 times the rate of the normal cells in the untreated group or the control groups. So all of a sudden, we've got healthy cells being able to grow up to 2.5 times faster, and we're getting the growth of cancer cells inhibited by over 90%.
Wow, that's
and it's just water.
That's incredible. Yeah, so that part about the 90% reduction in cancer growth, you know, that's amazing in itself. But to hear that healthy cells respond totally differently than cancer cells, 2.5 times the regular growth, is that right?
That's right, up to 2.5 times the growth of the control cells. So in other words, the actual healthy cells are even healthier now, and so that they're capable of growing at an accelerated rate.
Yeah, so that, just so we're sure on this, it's not, if they're growing at 2.5 times, it's not because they're abnormal or there's an abnormal circumstance. In its optimum state, the cells should be doing that, correct?
That's correct, because what they're doing is they're growing. I mean, they do, the only thing that they do add, which they add to both groups evenly, is a culture solution, which is just nutrients for the actual cells to grow. In other words, some food for them so that they can actually grow in a dish, just like people have to eat to grow. So what we're seeing is when the untreated cells, they're just in their normal environment, well, doing the best they can, but then, of course, when they're put in the treated environment, they are, yes, responding up to 2.5 times more, because now they can do what they're supposed to do. In other words, they're doing it at the rate they're supposed to do it, rather than the slow rate of the control group, because the control group is just not able to grow at its proper rate. So,
okay, so
so they're not. So you're right. They're not abnormal. They're actually responding normally versus the other group, which is just not responding like it's supposed to or like it's capable of.
Right. So for the people who use the Aqua Chi and have used it for healing, you know, and things like that, it does seem to speed up things like take down inflammation and things like that. Because do you think that has a correlation with the idea of the faster cellular growth? You know, I like to say recharging the cells, but you know, it actually just helps the regenerative properties of the cell along.
Yeah, you're right. It is recharging the cells, and you are right. And people have talked about it for a long time in terms of the increased recovery. You know, you're likely to recover at a much faster rate from illness if you're using the Aqua Chi than you would if you didn't.
Right.
And that's one of the purposes it has been used for a long time, nearly 2 decades.
Okay, so the researchers haven't been able to say exactly why they're seeing this result. Is that true? At this point, not quite sure what the mechanism is?
You're right. At this point, it is driving them crazy.
Okay, but I think
being able to understand.
But you have,
yeah, they don't
you probably have an
the
idea.
molecular mechanism.
Why don't you talk a little about what you think?
Well, what they're looking for is, in the world of this kind of research, they're looking for chemical actions and chemical reactions and all the things associated with those two things. And what we're doing is we're addressing a third component, which is the electrical interaction. And what we're saying is when that electrical function is not at its optimum, then the cell is not going to respond at its optimum. Mm-hmm. So with the alteration of that optimum charge setting, in other words, you like to talk about charging up, which is correct, then you're going to see a different response in the cell.
Okay, yeah. Hey, everybody, I see that there are questions coming in. I will definitely get to those. Just trying to get to the root of the research at the moment, so stand by. We'll get into that. All right, so when they started doing this research, did you personally have any kind of a idea what they might find, like as if you've been doing it for many years yourself, or were you like, I'd like to know just what happens, you know? Curious.
Well, I definitely was curious. However, I did have my beliefs about what was going to happen, and of course it did, which is we did see the effect on cancer. We did see the effect on the healthy cells, because we have actually, because we're talking about, you know, in vitro, which is in a petri dish, but we already had, like, you know, 2 decades of in vivo, which is actually where it's in the person, and we've seen these effects in people over those 2 decades anyway. So this is really awesome, because it's confirmation of what we've been saying for a long time, and it's just backing up all the testimonial, all the practitioners, all the people that have been working with it for a long time now, with solid scientific evidence.
Right. Okay. So we'll go back to, for the people who are coming in, we've been talking about research that has been done at the university level by was actually spearheaded by a particular woman who had been using the Aqua Chi personally, and also is in the middle, I guess, of doing a doctorate. Do you know what degree she's getting, Steve?
Right, that's right. She's currently getting her PhD in nursing, which is the highest level of nursing that you can ascertain. It's not very common to find someone with a PhD in nursing.
Right.
It's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of years. But she's doing her, like, I guess you could call it her thesis on the Aqua Chi machine. So her scientific papers to receive her PhD are actually based on this work. In other words, the work with the Aqua Chi. So when she receives her PhD, it's going to be all about the Aqua Chi. Right.
Well, would you say that took some guts to you know, come in with an all natural treatment? She probably had some skepticism among her teachers, right?
Oh, that's an understatement, Michael.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, because you know, I've been sort of, you know, talking to her for, you know, 4 years now, and it started off, and there was a lot of resistance. And initially, when she wanted to do it, there was a lot of skepticism. But in more recent times, since she's getting all these trial results, she's already spoken at 2 conventions where she was very well received. And so now everything has changed. Everybody's gathering around, everybody's supporting her. They're all excited, but it was hard to get from that point to this point, because there was a lot of ridicule, a lot of criticism, and of course skepticism, but that's all changed now.
Right, exactly. So, okay, so what Marcy, that's her name, what she accomplished is doing an initial trial with a control group of cancer cells and cancer cells in a petri dish with Aqua Chi treated water. Over the period of growth that was measured, the normal group grew at the normal rate for cancer cells, right? And in the Aqua Chi treated water in that petri dish, there was a 90% reduction in the growth of the cancer cells. Did I get that?
It was. Yes, it's inhibiting the growth of, or the division of the cancer cells growth by over 90%.
Wow. Okay.
So, and one thing I haven't mentioned yet, and would like to point out at this moment, is this research has been ongoing for 2 years, and it is still ongoing. Even as we're speaking now, they're starting to run new cancer lines. In other words, they're taking different types of cancers now and running the trials over and over again with different types of cancer.
Okay, so
it's not something that they looked at and went, "Well, that's interesting." It's ongoing. In other words, it's not stopping.
Okay.
And currently, there are plans for human trials being drawn up right now.
Okay, so there's a definite progression going on. along the lines of that, somebody asked about if there had been anything published yet, and I think the answer to that is it's too premature, but I'll let you answer that question.
No, they haven't actually published yet. They are planning to publish this summer, which is not very far away. Mm-hmm. But I think they've decided to run a couple more cell lines, and so we could still probably see publication hopefully late this summer.
Okay, well that's something we got to look forward to for sure. There's been a number of questions that came in. First, Connie, our speaker is Steve Walker. He's a developer of the Aqua Chi foot bath itself, so we have the opportunity every once in a while to do that, and I'm glad you came on, Steve. So let's address a couple of questions, and some of these are not directly related to the research we've been talking about, but an outgrowth of the conversation. So let's see what we have here. William asks, how are the treatments affecting oxygen levels? Has this been measured? I see oxygen levels appear higher after treatment. So this is what he's seeing. Is there anything that you've seen about like that?
Yes, I've seen that before. That is something that's been done by a lot of people over the years. I've been involved with testing myself where we've been monitoring people's oxygen levels. It's been reported by a lot of nurses and practitioners. So this is not something that would be unusual. This is something that you could almost expect to see in a lot of cases. The oxygen levels going up.
Yeah, on one of our previous calls, there was a chiropractor who actually used a little device called an oximeter. Some of our viewers and listeners know what it is, but it's a little device that you can put on the tip of your finger. You clip it on. It will read your pulse, and it will also measure the level of oxygen in the blood. And if you wanted to pick one of these up, it's not super expensive. You can get them for around $25 if you maybe go on Amazon or someplace like that. You can search OXIMETER, oximeter, and oximeter is another way to put it. And you could do tests yourself, but from what I've seen, particularly for people who have respiratory issues, if you do a before and after with that, you will notice an increase in oxygen after an Aqua Chi is done. So let's see. Connie asks, Aqua Chi water, the charged water with only using the module, then give it to plants. Never heard of this. Well, you can do that, Connie. That you can do.
Definitely. You can also use the foot bath water. But I would actually just strain it through a coffee filter if it's just a paper filter if it's a little chunky.
Okay.
And then go give it to your indoor plants. If you give it to your indoor plants, they're going to stay all vibrant and healthy and glossy because they get sometimes they look a little run down, and every 6 to 8 months you may want to go and put them in the sun. But if you start watering with the water from your foot bath, you're not going to see that happen anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so it says, where was this research? Who's doing this research? Is this the University of Tennessee? Is that what you said?
The research where they're running the cancer cell lines?
Yes.
Yes, that's the University of Tennessee.
Okay. Let's see. What else we got here? Where can we access any research documents? That would probably be a waiter till later this summer, maybe the fall. We'll have something, and obviously since they're carrying out new tests, that there will be more research to be published later on. On that note, Steve, what do you think if they see similar results in the second line of testing? Where's the progression from there? I mean, at what point does it kind of blow up and become this big discovery,
I would guess pretty much as soon as they publish, because what they're doing is, I guess they're trying to keep it in-house because it's something amazing that they've discovered, and so they're trying to get as much data as possible before they publish, because as soon as they publish, everybody's going to try and jump on it, because there is nothing like it. I mean, there's billions of dollars being spent probably monthly on cancer research, and nobody is achieving results like we're achieving with just water. In other words, all the things that they're playing with have nasty side effects, all kinds of issues, whereas this is so simple, so clean, and so effective.
Right. That's non-invasive. That's the word. So,
yeah.
A comment from Michelle. She says, in talking about the results she reported, she said, I knew there would be a change because I have had results with every cancer patient. I guess Michelle works with many of them, one being my mother. Good results. How did it work out, Michelle? You could type that in if you'd like. But let's go on and say, Michelle asks, is this being recorded? Yes, it is being recorded. Working on new cancer patients and would like them to see this recording. Okay, well, that will be coming out. Michelle also says, I have done the foot bath on cancer patient that had an O2 saturation level of 89, and after the foot bath, it was 98%. That's a pretty huge increase. I'd be curious, Michelle, if you see when you treat people over a period of sessions, whether as you come back to each session, whether that number is the same at the beginning or whether it's a steady increase over time. Because you know, my intuition tells me that it would probably increase oxygen levels over time. Let's see what else we have here. Will the Aqua Chi interfere with chemotherapy? I usually have my cancer chemo patients wait 24 hours after treatment before doing an Aqua Chi session. Is this necessary? What's your feeling on that? I know that you should probably say.
No, this is a really common thing that people probably aren't aware of. When people that are using it for chemo, you just need to get on it and start using it every second day. It's not really relevant whether you do it before or after you come out of your session, or even if you do it on the same day or the opposite day of your session. Mm-hmm. The idea is to just keep using it regularly every second day, which is, and that's fortifying the body for what chemo is doing. So it's not a matter of like picking the perfect time to do it over a short period. It's more stay on it. And if you can also use it prior to starting any kind of chemo or radiation therapy for that matter, your body is going to be in much better shape. Because now a lot of people that do use it, they don't tend to have that massive energy drop. They don't get sick. There's a lot of things that can happen. With some people, it's even gone so far as they don't even lose their hair.
Wow. All right, so I think it's probably a good time to put the usual disclaimer in, and that's saying that when dealing with any kind of illness, you should be talking to a doctor, not taking anything that you hear or see as the gospel word. So we can only share the experiences that we see and that you are sharing with us as we're doing this. So keep that in mind, that we can't obviously act as any kind of doctors. So consult your physician in the final analysis. Mary asks, what about contraindications with medicine? And I think we could probably talk about contraindications in general. The ones that I'm aware of are pregnant women, not doing the bath with pregnant women, and perhaps not doing the bath with people who have electronic devices in the body.
Well, if I could just interject there, Michael,
yes.
a second. With the contraindications, what we've learned over the last 2 decades, has kind of changed. Because initially, when we created those, it was really because it was untested on the particular conditions and what that you were just talking about. The only 2 that are relevant anymore based on basically 2 decades of use on millions and millions and millions of the population. The only 2 that we're looking at now is if you are pregnant at this particular point, and if you have any transplanted organs. So if it's not one of those 2, it's okay.
Okay, all right. Okay, very good. So that means that even if you're taking medication, you don't have to change anything about what your doctor prescribes. Just follow what the doctor says, and as Steve just said, do the Aqua Chi every other day, and that's
right.
That's the prescription for the Aqua Chi. So
right, and I mean, if you're actually taking prescription medicines like something for blood pressure, for example, if you're being regularly monitored by your doctor, which is probably a good thing, what generally happens is they will alter your dose, and you'll get onto something lighter and lighter. And there is quite a large handful of doctors currently operating in the US that are actually using the Aqua Chi to slowly wean their patients off of any blood pressure medication and replacing it with the actual Aqua Chi treatments.
Right. Yeah, that's something that over the years I've heard many times about the idea that once you start improving, you have to consult with your doctor and say, I don't think I need as much of this as I'm doing. So don't assume either that if you're having good results with the Aqua Chi that you just have to keep taking the same regimen of drug treatment, because it may not. You may not have to. You may not. That's the reason you need to talk to your doctor about it.
Right. Because I mean, any good doctor, when you go in, you take a test, they're going to look at your results and go, wow. They're going to ask you what you've been doing. However, what they'll do is they'll go after the test results, and they will adjust any medication accordingly based on what they see.
Right. Testing always helps to determine that. So.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Speaking of that, Mary asks, are blood thinners also included? Do you have to take any precautions with people who are on blood thinners? Because we talked about it before that there is a slight thinning effect on the blood when you do the Aqua Chi. So what's your thinking on that?
Well, yes, it will. It will improve your blood. And that's pretty much what I was talking about before, people, going back to their doctors, being tested, and then actually having their levels of medication altered. However, going back the other way, we haven't seen any negative reactions in terms of an over-thinning of the blood to a point where it may present some sort of a risk to you.
Okay. Deborah asks, even though the information isn't out to the public, published, may we share it? Well, I think you could share this recording, but I would probably be careful about going to the newspaper with it, because as we all know, with fledgling research, you have to allow it to do what they're going to do without trying to put too much of a spotlight on it, especially with natural treatments. So I'd say yeah, sure. I mean, we're just this is a discovery process right now. And I personally would like it to continue. So okay, so can you run the Aqua Chi in water by itself and then drink the water? That's the question Chris asks.
Well, that's a tough one. In theory, yes. But the reason there's not a lot of information circulating about that is there are quite a few rules when it comes to doing something like that. You can't drink too much of it. It could make you ill. The water that you start with is very important. And one of the things when we released the product, we tested a lot of water on a very large scale, and the difference in water, particularly across the US, is huge. It's massive. So to have like just a couple of rules where people could just do it was just too difficult. So we decided not to release any information about actually making the water and drinking it, because, like I said, one of our concerns is there's so much stuff in the water. Some of it needs a lot of filtering, some of it doesn't. Some water is not suitable for charging and drinking, while some is. But it's complicated, and so there's going to be more research done on that, so that we can introduce that later. but we'd like to do that in sort of a controlled medical environment first.
Right. Yeah. And you know, remember that the even doing just a foot bath has the same internal benefit as you would think, you know, drinking water does. So, you know, remember that as you're doing a bath, your blood is circulating at, I don't know, so something like 90 miles an hour throughout your system. So even just sitting in a bath, you'll circulate your blood a number of times during a session. So that has a direct impact on the body right there. So let's see here. Pam asked, will there be a recording? Yes, there will, Pam. You can visit the same link that you came to see this presentation. Probably tomorrow there'll be a recording there. All right. So what else we have here? Can it be used every day, Steve?
I would recommend that just use it every second day, especially if you're going to use it for a long period of time. There are a few circumstances where people can get away with it every day, but that would only be in certain chronic situations where, particularly if you were elderly and it was giving you relief of pain, and so you were using it every day because it's altering your quality of life in such a way that the impact of anything that could possibly happen from overusing it's just a risk assessment. In other words, the rewards are far greater than any risks.
Okay.
But of course, if you're, yeah.
All right. So Robin asked if you do it every other day, should you be taking minerals? And I think, you know, behind that question, a lot of people say, does it leach minerals from my body along with toxicity? What's the answer there?
It does not.
Yeah.
It actually doesn't remove anything from your body. What it does is it gives your cells the ability to get out what it needs to get out.
Right. Okay. William says, I've treated through the hands and feet. Has anything been published about the extremities that are more effective? I think what you're saying is William, if you're treating the hands directly and there's a condition in the hands, you know, I believe that would have a more direct impact on that area. I'll let Steve weigh in on that too.
Yeah, you're right. If you had someone with like chronic arthritis in the hands, for example, you're better off putting their hands in there. If it was in their ankles or their feet, then use the feet.
Right, and you can also do a full body bath, which is where you put your module in the bathtub with you, and you know, that's you know, a good it covers the most surface area of the body of any way you could possibly treat. And so if you have bursitis in the shoulders or back pain, things like that, that may be a good to do the Aqua Chi there. So
yeah, for those of you using it at home in your own personal setting, that's what I would recommend, using it in the bathtub, because that's what's going to be best.
Right. Okay. So Connie, that answer your question about the you know, whole body bath there, I think. Michelle says, okay, she's giving the answer about her mom. My mom was told by her pulmonologist that she had less than a year to live in 2006 because of her lung condition. She was put on the list for a lung transplant. When the lung was offered to her, because of fear transplant and the results she saw with the foot bath, she turned down the lung and bought a foot bath. And she lived over 6 more years. Well, that's pretty nice. How old was your mom when she died, Michelle? I'll let you type that in, because I guess it's going from, you know, weeks to live, I guess, to years, which in itself is good, and no ugly drugs and things like that could have been there. So, any case, any other questions? Type them into the interface. We are probably thinning out with the questions a bit. If there's any other questions, you can put them in now. And I guess at this point, what if I'll ask Steve, if this testing progresses in a positive way, is there a point at which the because this is a natural treatment, that the the medical authorities would kind of question it, because it's happened sometimes that you have natural treatments that simply don't, have the same medical quote-unquote establishment seal of approval, What are your thoughts on that?
To me, that's I guess an easy question, having understood history, particularly a little bit about medical history. A lot of the medical procedures and things that they're using now used to be in the same boat we are now.
Mm-hmm.
Where before, like for example, they discovered penicillin, they were using silver, and that was a very effective treatment, but now they knock silver, yet that's what medical establishment used before they had penicillin, and it was pretty effective then too.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of other examples of various different medical procedures and medicines and natural things that are commonly used now that even 10 years ago weren't accepted.
Right. Okay. Question from Felicity. She asks, does it make any difference if the bathtub is cast iron or not? And I think that's probably...
If you're going to... Most people don't have the cast iron tubs anymore. It's preferable to use something that's not metallic, particularly... But if it had enamel on it, because most of those cast iron tubs had like an enamel finish on it, because we're looking for something to create an insulation from metal. Now, it's not going to harm you in any way if you did it, in terms of you're not going to get a shock or anything. But what we're trying to do is, because we're using complex magnetic fields and so, and because cast iron would be a magnetic material, we don't want any interference in the signal.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm talking about that. It's like you're better off using a modern tub.
Okay, and let's extend that question to the type of foot bath used. There's everything from a small dishpan plastic type of thing to copper basins to stainless steel containers. Is there any guidance you have for what type of tub to use?
I would typically stick with a plastic. Okay. Obviously, they're very cheap. They're readily available everywhere. But if you want to see a small increase in the effect, then you could also go to a copper foot bath. But if you use copper, it can't have any kind of a coating on it. It's just to be the straight metal.
Okay, yeah. I normally tell people, if you use a metal bath, just make sure it's on a non-conductive surface, a carpet or some sort of a pad of some kind, so that it's not directly on concrete or on the ground itself. Only because then I believe some of that benefit that's going into your body could be drawn away through the tub.
Right, well, yeah, it could cause interference and lessen the effect.
Right, there you go. All right, so, Deborah's talking about client, okay, she says, I have a client that had detached retina surgery that left scar tissue. He came in with a snorkel and placed his entire face, wow, this is unusual. He came in with a snorkel and placed his entire face in the Aqua Chi treated water. He saw an amazing difference. He would also bring in fruit and put it in the Aqua Chi. I'm not sure why he was doing that, but could be going back to the treatment of plants. William says, can you speak about the different colors of waste that is extracted? I find it very telling about overall health. Well, I mean, before Steve answers it, I'll say that there are, any number of charts that are out on the internet that say the water is this, the water is that, equating to certain conditions in the body or organs. And my answer to that is, stay away, because that's not how you should be using or interpreting what the Aqua Chi is doing. But I'll let Steve answer that question too.
Right. No, you're spot on, Michael. And one of the things, by using one of those charts, and this relates to a question earlier where, is the medical going to think it's some kind of quackery or anything? Well, if you're going to use those types of charts, then yes, that's going to perpetuate the quackery, because in my experience over all the years and the thousands of tests we've done, there absolutely is no way to link colour to anything specific, particularly if you go from area to area. You're going to see different results in the water just by testing it without the seed in it. So it makes it impossible to sort of do any kind of prediction or, you know, give anyone any kind of concrete information about what they may be afflicted by just looking at the colour of the water.
Right. Yeah. So the observation for me is that, you know, the bottom line is that you have to see and feel results in the body, not just rely on what you see. Although I guess there could be some kind of a placebo effect there. Doesn't hurt to have that reaction, but certainly don't look at the color of the water, look at a chart and say, oh, that's what it is, because it's just, you know, until we have 10,000 tests with different people, we can't make any kind of assumption like that. Christy says, just a note, I have my clients put their hands in the water, if they can physically do it, and these I take it are people who have arthritis. Let me see, where is that? Okay. But I have many elderly clients with severe arthritis, and they cannot comfortably put their hands in the water. We soak their feet, and they still have extremely remarkable benefits with the arthritis in their hands. Okay, so that's, you know, again speaking to the fact that just because you put your feet in doesn't mean that there is not a overall benefit to the body, because it is a holistic treatment.
The effect travels through the entire body.
Yeah, it travels through the entire body, exactly. Pam, pregnant women are a contraindication. It's not because anything's ever happened, but it's just because it's we're cautious. You have to be cautious with that group. You see that in many different circumstances, and unfortunately, it is still a contraindication with the Aqua Chi. But that being said, Steve, didn't your wife do treatments when your daughter, before she was born? Is that right?
Absolutely, the entire time. Why it's a contraindication is because there are so many problems out there. There are so many miscarriages and complications with childbirth these days. We don't want anybody, like a practitioner, for example, getting caught up in something where someone may want to blame the actual Aqua Chi for something going wrong. However, in reality, it's the opposite. You know, we've had a lot of experience where someone may not be able to get pregnant or conceive, and, you know, we're seeing people change that. We're seeing people that are, you know, had like 2 or 3 miscarriages in the past. Then we start on my course of Aqua Chi, and then they'll go full term. But if anybody was to ever try that, I would always recommend that they've already had 2 or 3 miscarriages, because there's something wrong. But for all intents and purposes, that's why we're saying don't use it. Because
right.
We just don't, yeah.
Okay, so Lori has a question. What about nerve pain and circulation issues? Again, this is kind of a medical question. Any kind of answers we give are just based on the feedback that we've gotten from people. So it's anecdotal. It's not a medical study. Things like that. You have to experience it, and you know, we have practitioners here as well as individuals who use the bath, and you know, just rely on what you see, and then of course check with your doctor on that. But in the feedback you've gotten, Steve, what have you heard about related to nerve pain and circulation?
Nerve pain. Well, it's very difficult to. That's a really hard one, because a lot of the time when people start talking about the problems that they actually have, in a lot of instances, most people don't even have a medical diagnosis when they actually talk about it. So, for me to sort of, even with all these years of experience, it's not often easy to relate some of the changes that are actually taking place in the body with any sort of specific or medical changes, because most people, like I say, just don't have the medical information in the first place to know what's possibly wrong. So you can't say, well, this changed because I started taking the Aqua Chi. But in general, when you look at it, when you start talking about nerve and stuff like that, yeah, there has been some very positive results. But in terms of talking specifically about what those changes were, what it has done to the nerves or anything, no, that would be very difficult.
Right.
Because it's something that not even most doctors understand.
Yeah, I can say that from I was educated from the people who bought Aqua Chi's and used it. There was a condition I had never heard of called neuropathy, which is a diabetic condition where that affects the lower extremities, where you can actually have a very painful condition, or you lose sensation, and that would be a nerve condition. And I've had many people who have reported that they had that discomfort either lessened or reversed. So that's just,
Right. And
go ahead.
Right, and that's kind of what I was, a good example, because that's kind of what I was trying to get across, because when you talk about the neuropathy, it's where they lose the feeling and sensation in their feet, and then, like you said, there's been a lot of cases where we see that return, but why is it returning? Is it because there was some kind of nerve damage, or is it just the cells aren't communicating properly, or what's actually happening? And so, like I say, in a lot of instances, they just don't know. But it is something that happens as an effect. But what the actual molecular biology behind that particular aspect of it, it's difficult to sort of follow.
Right. Okay. Michelle makes a comment talking about perfect attendance. I think that's in school. She says, my sons, age 15 and 17, have used the bath since 2006. And at the end of this year, they are still carrying the title of perfect attendance. I'm also never sick. We will never be without the Aqua Chi foot bath. Well, that's I bet you the schools love it. Perfect attendance. That's pretty awesome. So, Michelle, thank you for that. Okay, let's see. Anything else? Okay. Well, I think we're getting close to the end here. We've been on over 45 minutes. I'll give one more opportunity for you guys to type in any questions you have, and then we'll wrap it up. But I'm going to just recap a little for the people who came in late. The big news on this call is the fact that there has been research that has been concluded, the first line of research at the University of Tennessee, where there was Petri dish testing with cancer cells. This is not, actual human testing yet, but that's probably going to come at some point. And the short of that test is that there was a control, and there was a Aqua Chi treated water dish and cancer cells in both. The control had normal cancer cell growth. That means that whatever the usual growth of a cancer cell happened in that medium, that's what happened. In the Petri dish that had the cancer cells with the Aqua Chi treated water, there was a 90% reduction in the growth of the cancer cells. So don't know exactly what the mechanism is, but this was done. It was not just a one-off. They did a series of these, and now there's a second line of testing that's going to be done with, I guess, more and different varieties of cancer cells, this type of thing. So it's very exciting stuff. I think that it's going to lead to something pretty astounding eventually. That's my hope, because I think it's good to have the medical research coming out that way. Let's see. So I think that pretty much is it. We've gotten a lot of questions answered. So Steve, I'll thank you for taking the time to come on and talk. This was a real lively conversation. And for the people who were on the chat, you were also very lively. I was kind of watching you chatting back and forth, answering each other's questions, so this is a good thing too. Real good, lively discussion. So anyway, thanks everybody for coming on, and Steve, thank you for joining as well.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
All right, have a good one.